All right, this discussion will be a very brief overview of mineral supplements for cattle, grazing cattle specifically. It's probably good to remember these key points. Firstly, that minerals are really important for cattle health and performance. We don't want to short cattle on the minerals, macro or micro minerals that they require. Secondarily, forages aren't balanced for cattle, and forages vary over the year. That's a really common theme in a lot of grazing discussions as things change over the year, right? But forages do provide some minerals, so it's important to balance what isn't in the forage rather than necessarily using a blanket single mineral program for all cattle, for all forages, for all parts of the year, all times of the year, okay? Finally, minerals are expensive, so we need to do a good job on finding the right mineral and managing it well while maintaining somewhat conservative attitude and making sure that our mineral dollars will pay off and that our mineral is a good investment, okay? So this is the average mineral concentration of forages in Oklahoma. You can certainly see that forages vary in mineral content from one forage to the next. Take phosphorus, for example. On average, alfalfa and small grains essentially exceed cattle requirements in phosphorus. Native range is well below cattle requirements for phosphorus. Most forages aren't adequate in sodium. That's why you'll see salt recommended to be supplemented to cattle almost all the time. That's also the reason that wildlife are attracted to salt licks, if you're familiar with that. That's because forages aren't adequate in sodium for animals' needs. Most forages aren't adequate in copper or zinc. Selenium isn't usually a big concern in Oklahoma, but there's some areas of the United States where that are severely deficient in selenium. Okay. So here's kind of another recap of those thoughts. You can see here a summary of those same summary points that I kind of just went through. But they're printed out for you. You can kind of read them a different way if that helps you. So something to think is that forages are typically low in phosphorus, and this is especially true for dormant forages. Dormant warm season grasses are typically low in phosphorus. So a common mineral supplement for cows is a 12-12 mineral. Those are labeled. You can look at the label of a mineral and see a 12-12 is 12% calcium and 12% phosphorus by weight, and so that's a common mineral for cows or even stocker cattle in a dormant forage situation. Because the 12% phosphorus is going to be enough in most situations to provide those animals the phosphorus that they need. We're usually not that worried about calcium in forages, but the calcium kind of comes along with the phosphorus in getting that phosphorus source into the cows. Something to think about is that a lot of the supplements that we feed today actually have a significant amount of phosphorus in them, especially dried distillers grains and corn gluten feed. Those feedstuffs, they're byproducts of milling corn, and they'll actually add phosphoric acid to some of those in the processing of those supplements. Plus, the residues that are dried distillers grains and corn gluten feed, they're essentially residues of processing corn for ethanol or corn syrup or things like that. And essentially what they do is concentrate the nutrients from corn that are not starch into these byproducts. And so dried distillers grains and corn gluten feed have much more protein than corn, much more phosphorus than corn on a dry matter basis, because they're essentially, if you remove the starch from corn, you get a concentration of the other nutrients into the distillers grains and corn gluten feed. So if you're feeding distillers grains and corn gluten feed, something you can do is calculate how much phosphorus those supplements are supplying to your cows, and you potentially that could offset some of the needs that your cows may have for a loose mineral supplement. You might be able to get by with a little bit cheaper mineral supplement that doesn't have quite as much phosphorus in it, because you know you're getting phosphorus from the distiller's grains or corn gluten feed that you're supplementing those cows with anyway, right? So some things about mineral management to think about. You want to, my recommendation is you want to buy a decent mineral formulated for your situation. This kind of leads into a discussion of custom mineral mixes. If you're a big operator and have a lot of cattle and are paying really close attention to your mineral management, it might make sense for you to have a custom mineral formulated for your ranch and use that. That might make sense. For a lot of people, they're going to be probably better off buying an off-the-shelf mineral and not going to the expense of having something custom formulated and buying in that quantity and those kind of things. But probably better off buying a mineral off the shelf, but realize there are many mineral packages to choose from that are kind of off-the-shelf products. And you want to visit with your feed supplier, their nutritionist, and make sure that you're selecting the right off-the-shelf product for the time of year and the type of cattle and the forage situation that you're using that mineral in. Okay, so usually that's easier and more cost-effective than going the complete custom formulation route. Another mineral thing to do is include an ionophore when you can. That's a nutrition thing. If you're not familiar with ionophores, those are feed additives that improve the efficiency of fermentation in rumens. Meninsen or rumensin is the one that you hear about a lot. Well, Bovatec is another one that's common, and so those are good things to include when you can. You want to monitor intake of your mineral. There's some mineral monitoring tools that are available on beefextension.com, and you want to kind of keep track of how much mineral you're putting out, how much your cows are consuming, and try to manage it a little closer than just pouring out mineral and letting the cows eat all they want. The cows typically won't consume, they voluntarily won't consume exactly the right amount of mineral that they need. Sometimes they'll consume way more than you want them, than what they nutritionally need. If they're way over consuming mineral, they're just wasting money, right? So you don't want to necessarily feed them all they'll eat. You want to feed them what they need and kind of monitor that intake and manage it so that they don't overconsume. There's some things that you could do to modulate mineral intake if you got a herd that's over consuming mineral or under consuming mineral. There's some things you can do to kind of modulate that. And then finally, the one I would say is invest in a quality mineral feeder. You don't want to just feed your mineral in kind of an open tub on the ground, or you certainly don't want to pour it on the ground. You probably don't want to pour it in an open trough, things like that. You're going to lose a lot to the weather. Cattle are going to spill a lot in those kind of situations. So you want to get invest kind of in a good quality feeder. There's a video here of an extension specialist in North Carolina showing you how to make a pretty nice mineral feeder from kind of scrap materials that you might have around. If you're interested in that, that's a pretty cool video to watch and see how he puts together a pretty nice mineral feeder that doesn't cost very much. And then this video also shows the type of mineral feeder that we use on most of our research ranches. They're these kind of plastic on the ground feeders that have the rubber flap over the top of them, and we find these work really well, protect the mineral and do a pretty nice job of keeping the cattle out of them. So you can kind of see how they've got sections in there. You can put mineral in sections there. Looks like he's feeding two different kinds of mineral in there, which is not something that I recommend, but in most situations I don't. But that's kind of how they're set up there. But you can see how those mineral feeders work, and generally investing in a good mineral feeder is going to be money well spent and save you wasted mineral in the long run. All right. So that's what we had about mineral feeders. Sounds good. We'll see you on the next one.